Okay, so today's review is for Alice is Missing. And we decided to try out a new format that we will be implementing in future videos. Not necessarily all board games, but some of them, where in order to speed up the process, we're just going to have each of us speak for 2 minutes, say whatever we want about the game, and then as soon as our 2 minutes is up, even if it's in the middle of a sentence, we cut and move on to the next person. Unfortunately, I don't think this is a very good game to be the inaugural edition of that format because there's honestly too much to say about it. So I regret having recorded the new format video, but since we did anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just show that next, and then I'll come back to give some additional thoughts on the game afterwards. So why don't we get started with the rule explanation?
Alice is Missing is a silent role-playing game where the titular character, Alice, has gone missing, and the players, each taking on the role of a certain friend or family member from her life, will play and interact with each other as they try to solve the mystery of her disappearance. The game is a couple hours long and deals with mature themes including death and depression. The idea of the game is not really to play a game so much, but to role-play as people in Alice's life, done entirely over a group text message chat. One player acts as Alice's best friend and also as the facilitator, sort of a dungeon master who makes sure the game proceeds smoothly and that the rules are followed, i.e. that the other players are flipping over cards when they are supposed to, etc. To start, the players come up with a background for their character, including a secret that no one else knows, which informs how you behave, and each player will leave a voicemail recording to Alice before the game based on the little information they have, which should incorporate the background and secret and which acts as the last message the characters each sent to Alice. The characters are also given drive cards, which basically fill in details about how the character approaches the mystery, and also details the relationships with the other characters. Each player introduces themselves to the others by giving some basic information before play begins. A soundtrack is provided on a YouTube playlist which fits the mood of the game and should reflect the rise in tension. After the intros, each player tries the remaining characters to begin texting with each other, pretending they really are the character assigned, that they know Alice, and that they are concerned for her well-being. To move the plot along, each player is handed a few randomized clue cards, which are only revealed to the player holding it once the designated number of minutes shown on the back of the card remain in play, i.e. the 50 card is played when 50 minutes remain, and so on. The 10-minute card stays on the table and is revealed last. The clue cards will give a prompt such as, you discover a social media post by one of the suspects that relates to Alice, and you as the player have to provide what the post might have said and what you think about it. As well, there are suspect cards and location cards which will be used to feed into the plot additional characters and places that may be relevant to how Alice disappeared. Finally, there are searching cards which are only drawn when the players have hit a dead end and need a new story twist to spur along further conversation. Basically, the story is totally random, and while informed by the arbitrary reveal of cards, the actual plot is largely made up by the players as they go along. This continues until the 10-minute card is revealed, where the pertinent suspect and locations to resolve the game are revealed, and typically one player character's life becomes threatened. Finally, the voicemails are played. After the game, the characters are encouraged to debrief and discuss their feelings about the game's resolution and story.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the rule book because I was kind of in control of handling the rules and making sure everyone understood what was going on. I will say that the rule book is pretty bad. It's way too long. It doesn't give enough examples. It doesn't, for the uninitiated, it doesn't really like kind of wade you into the waters of role playing, which are pretty important. And it should have given more examples and stuff. And there was a lot of concern about like trying not to trigger the reader and stuff like that I think was like kind of honestly a waste of time, and I just needed the game explained to us a little better. It's unlike anything we've ever played, obviously, so I think it needs to kind of just get to the point and explain how this game works. And it is obviously more of a role-playing experience. It's not really a game in a true sense, but whatever. Some people will have philosophical debates about that, I suppose. The biggest problem with this game is that it's really like, obviously it's focused on role playing, but it's weird and it's difficult to try to role play at the same time you're making up your own story. Incredibly difficult, in fact, and it's hard to like think of the next thing that's going to happen and then also be playing the character and trying to do it effectively. And the game obviously gives you cards every so many intervals that you have to flip up. And then you just kind of react to them. You just mill around like, oh, we saw a thing, and like what our characters would do. It doesn't actually advance the story. It doesn't give us any agency. So that's probably the biggest like single group of problems. Additionally, I think the best way to fix this game is to give some more narrative scenarios that are a little less, that guide you a little bit more, and don't just say, here are random stimuli in the environment. Try to come up with a story around why you saw a red shoe on the driveway. It should just be a bunch of narratives like Betrayal at House on the Hill or something like that, that has like 10 plot points that maybe can be randomized, but they are set in stone somewhat. And then you play through them and you can mix them up. All right, we're at about 30 seconds.
Okay, so the theme of this game is like, so the cards are pretty random, and basically everything depends on what card that you get. So I remember that you get like a card that like sets up the like the I don't know, like what do you call it, like the main antagonist, and like so but it could be any number of cards. And so okay, so basically the people who made this game play Life is Strange are like, wow, this is so cool, let's turn this to a board game. And so they made it would be so much better if they made like an app for this game. But if I remember right, it's like what, like a website or something like that that you like got all the clues from and all the music from. And so I've had a few to drink, okay? And there's cards. And you gotta tell a story, man. It's like role playing with these cards, and everything's randomized. But like you gotta like text message everybody, and it's just like, man, what the am I doing here? Like, I do remember liking this game more than everybody else, but like there's gotta be more to it, man. There's gotta be more meat to these bones. You know what I'm saying?
You're done.
Perfect.
You nailed it,
Is
buddy.
it like
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
So Emily is Missing is a board game that we played. So this game is heavily reliant upon make-believe and using your phone to text your other friends and drawing cards. And I think the game mechanics are pretty rigid and straightforward in a way that makes it not really all that interesting. I think the most fun to be had in this game is the initial lead up to starting it, reading the rules and seeing that it's, oh, we gotta change our phone contacts, and it's gonna rely upon us kind of telling a story by ourselves within our friend group, and it's gonna be like a mystery amongst ourselves. Oh my god, that's so intriguing. But then you kind of get into it, and it more dawns upon you that it's like not really that interesting. And you know, I think it's just it's bare bones. It's got a cool idea, but not that overall interesting. And I'd say if it's the kind of thing where if somebody could hand you a script that you had to like memorize like a page of script, and they said you have to remember this script and you're gonna act it out amongst your friends in public, and everyone's gonna see it, and that sounds like a really fun, interesting idea to you, like one of the previous reviewers here, then maybe it's a game for you. But that sounds kind of to me.
Bleep that out. We have time left?
Yeah.
it's okay.
Good. You just- You're not gonna.
Stop.
Okay, that was a bit of a train wreck, I think we can all admit. And this deserves discussion. It's at the very least, we all agree this is interesting, and it has an amazing concept, and it's story driven. And in this particular case, though, the big problem is that the players are responsible for making that story. It is difficult to roleplay at the exact same time you are inventing aspects of the story. But essentially, as the timer ticks down and cards start getting flipped, it'll just throw something totally random at you. Well, like here's one, for example. You find $10,000 in a duffel bag. So imagine you're 45 minutes into the game. You and your chums are kind of like texting each other, pretending to be these characters. And, you know, to our credit, we really played our parts as best as we could. And you know, you're coming to a lull. It's like, oh, we were at the train station, didn't really find a whole lot, or we found a shoe. What does that mean? Is it Alice's shoe? No, it looks like somebody else's shoe. You know, we're all making this up. And then it's just kind of like, well, what do we say next? And there's only 3 of us. Maybe if you had 6 people playing, there'd be a lot more kind of like natural, organic ingenuity and innovation going on. But for us, there were times where we didn't have much to say. Even though at the same time, it was also hard to keep track of all the text messages going back and forth, because you might have a separate conversation. Me and Rick might have a private conversation, Cody and Rick, keeping track of all that. And managing the time and making sure you're drawing your cards in the right order is, you know, a lot to keep in check at the same time that you're playing these characters, and like trying to remember what were my motivations, what did I say in the voicemail, you know, like all that going on. And then, you know, someone throws you like, you know, a wrench in the store, like you found $10,000 in a duffel bag. So now you have to invent a context for where you found it, why you found it. Someone has to be creative and try to think of an explanation for that $10,000 in a duffel bag. All this metagame stuff going on while you're trying to stay in character. It's difficult, and more than that, it's strained. I think disrupts what the designers were going for. But it's incredibly interesting. Whether it's actually a game, that's kind of hard to say. This is obviously role-playing at its most hardcore. There isn't, you know, a concrete objective. It's kind of more just play the characters for 90 minutes. Try to do your parts well. Cody made the suggestion, and you know, this would be cool maybe if you were on the outside looking in, watching us play, and you could follow our text messages on some like upper half of a screen, then you could see us in the bottom half, and you could kind of keep track of the plot. Or if this was just a video game telling you what the narrative was and you were reacting to it as, you know, like a Telltale game, you choose the type of reaction you want to have. But as it is, it's kind of a failure. Hard to compare to anything else, and you'll never feel the same way playing any other game as you play this. On that note, this game begs for replayability. There's so many of these cards. Look how many of these there's like 3 different options for each of the time codes. So like there's like 3, there's enough here for 3 games, and that's not including just mixing them together and having an infinite number of clue cards. You only encounter so many characters and locations during one play anyway. So there's all this potential for randomization going on here, but you're really only supposed to play at one time and then give it to other people for them to play or something like that. But one of the complaints I made during the review you saw, is that this rule book is kind of terrible. This is 40 something pages. Why is this so long? This game takes a minute to explain. I just did it, in fact. It's not that complicated. You play roles, every now and then you reveal a card, that's basically it. But this goes through so much unnecessary verbiage to try to explain the concept to you. It is kind of revolutionary, but it's not that revolutionary, guys. Also, there's all this like hand-holding going on, like be prepared, there's dark themes in this game. Yeah, I get it, you know, like we'll survive it, but it has a lot of, I mean, to their credit, they're trying to give trigger warnings to everybody and stuff. And they mean well, but I think it's a little patronizing to some extent. And it's not that good at just explaining the simple concept that the game is, because it's loading you down with all these things that you feel like you have to remember, when it's just like,
what would probably have benefited this rule book is just more examples. Like just it's like 3 pages, the whole rule book, and then for page 1 and 2 is just here's an example of a game. The common complaint we have with Sentinels of the Multiverse is that there are a lot of cards that require interpretation. However, this game, that's not a game killer, because this game requires nothing but interpretation. So you can house rule probably anything. If you run into a card that doesn't, but Cody had a card that he was very confused about because it required him to pretend to be his character's phone getting hacked by the killer. And so he was supposed to send a message as the killer warning us to stay away or something like that. But it was coming from his phone, and it was like, well, is he in character or out of character? Does he have to use the little chat designation to note that he's out of character right now? Does he need to say that this is from someone else's phone? The card left like a lot of the details up in the air, which is always frustrating for Cody. So it's a cool concept. It feels like what could have been the whole time you're playing it. It's not. And there isn't enough objective stuff you need to do. Like, what am I supposed to be doing for the next 90 minutes? I don't really know. And that can be frustrating and unsatisfying. What the game probably needs is a series of like core stories. Like, there are like 6 to 10, let's say, story archetypes here that are like, this is the betrayal story. This one's a story where Alice, she runs away from home, right? And then the next one's she gets murdered, and then this one's the one where it's actually a big trick on you. It's a big prank. She's fine, and everyone's in on it except you, or something like that. You could have 5 or 6 different stories that follow certain beats. The details of it can be interchangeable, but there are story beats that anchor the story that don't change, and they tell a fairly concrete story. I will spare you, but I think we had written a story where a particular character wouldn't have been available to be the killer. And so if that card had come up and it was that guy, though, that would have made the story not make sense. And so you could avoid a lot of those things if you have like an actual like shell of a narrative in the background that you choose from. And then that determines the type of cards you draw, et cetera, et cetera. And it would be good to give the characters some agency. Your characters don't really have agency. Yes, I can choose if I want to go to the lighthouse or go to the train station and look around. But unless a card comes up that gives me something to do there, I'm just kind of milling around killing time. And then you might draw one of these search cards, but then you might run into there's a $10,000 duffel bag. It's completely irrelevant to the story. So the whole 90 minutes, like you're testing out this technology of texting each other in a fake chat where you give each other the names of the characters in the story and so on, which, by the way, kind of a pain in the ass. You have a modern phone to do that. And it's already kind of awkward to try to like pretend to be somebody else and, acting like, oh, I just care so much about Alice. And it's like, I don't even know who Alice is. The game gives you 2 sentences about her, and then you just have to pretend to care about her, know her backstory, act like you've gone to school with her for 4 to, upwards years. I remember being one of Cody's points too, is it's like he just didn't really care that much about what was going on, despite us doing everything we could to play our parts. And, the music being as somber as it is, and you go back after you find out, in our case, that she had died, and you listen to our final voicemails to her, and it's like, oh, that's, like, I could see how this would be a sentimental, emotional moment for some people, and we just couldn't quite get there. So back to my point about agency, I think that it would make more sense for this game to have some actual game mechanics in it. Give me something to accomplish that it needs to get done by the end of those 90 minutes. And maybe there's a certain clue in a certain story scenario. At 20 minutes left, you need to have found the bloody knife, and in order to find the bloody knife, you have to uncover X number of locations. Give me something to do so the narrative is driven towards a goal. Talking to each other and, going to locations and just having all these arbitrary things happen and trying to draft a narrative around those things happening. And then we're all just kind of left with like, how is this going to end? Like, are we going to,
is the game gonna have a resolution, or are we gonna have to invent it? It was a kind of perplexing experience. The narrative also was kind of unsatisfying in that, like, oh, flip a coin, and then Rick ended up dying in our play. So like Rick just kind of died at the end. And he was playing the brother of Alice. So Alice is dead, Rick is dead, and then me and Cody are just kind of left to be like, oh no, this is horrible. I was like, what kind of an ending to a game is that? I'm fine with tragedy, but it felt random. It felt like this was just, well, shucks, he died. There was nothing we could have done about it, like literally nothing. And like, so you can have a lot of these like sort of off balance, asymmetrical kind of like loose ends that dominate a story. So there aren't enough safeguards in that regard too. I get that they were trying to make the story as unchained and not driven by a story that's already set in stone as much as possible, but this is literally, I think, the opposite extreme problem where there's just no structure. This is the kind of game that I think you hand off to some experienced gamers and you say, play this, give us some of your notes, and like we'll go back to the drawing board and we'll modify it 20% to give it a little bit more focus and a little bit more point and resolution. So the players have a satisfying experience and they're able to kind of enjoy the game a little bit more because they're not in charge of keeping track of so many things that they're inventing. We need some of that plot so that we don't have to, like, between three people who have a limited forms of communication, have to like invent it as a committee and then also play the characters in that committee. Anyway, I think we all made comparisons to Life is Strange. Like, honestly, even a lot of the plot is similar. It feels like they watched Life is Strange and said, let's make a board game out of it, but not pay for the license. Again, I would say this is mostly a flawed experiment at the end of the day. Cody and I were both at about like 60 as far as a grade, which honestly might be even a little generous. The texting thing was cool, but honestly, I think it would benefit probably from an app. It would change our names in everybody's phone, and it would have a picture we could use that was hand-drawn or something. And then we could even, there are so many of these things could be automated, especially with them being as random as they are. Look at this, a half full bottle of alcohol. But that you draw this at a random time, at a random place, by a random person, found a half bottle of alcohol. It's just pointless and arbitrary. None of these things have anything to do with the plot. So I know that's intentional, but they should probably have something to do with a plot. Do we recommend playing it? Boy, it's kind of like a nyctophobia thing. Like, yeah, I guess so. I don't promise that you'll like it. The experience is so unique that playing it's really the only way that you're ever going to understand it. But at the same time, it's flawed. It's imperfect. I don't even think I walk away from it saying I liked it. Quite the mixed bag answer to that, but I think that's as honest as I can be. All right, thanks for joining us. Again, in the future, we are not going to be, when we do the new format reviews, I'm not going to be doing one of these for every game in the future. If the game has enough interesting issues to discuss, then we'll just do a regular review. Otherwise, we will do the new format, and we won't be cheating with additional comments at the end. So look forward to that, I guess. Hopefully we'll do a better job actually reviewing it next time too. Thanks for joining us.
You bastard.
Nailed
it, bro.
Extreme close-up.
Well, all right, Cody. I trust you can do better than that.
Pull that out.
Now you'll notice that nobody's walking away understanding a thing about this game.
That's just fun.
I'm not moving, pal. I feel like I could have gone for another 5 minutes.